Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon, teacher.
This is my fourth lecture in a class of selected readings in British and American poetry. I'm going to talk about JohnDonne, a 17th century metaphysical poet, and my topic is "But we by a love so much refined." I'll first give a brief introduction to the life of the poet, and also a few words about metaphysical poetry in the 17th century. And then we'll have a close reading of JohnDonne's poem, A Valediction Forbidden Morning. We'll end up with a discussion over the themes of this poem: death, love, religious faith, and science. Okay. Now, let me read aloud the poem for you. A Valediction Forbidden Morning. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whispers to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say no. So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sign tempests move. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears, men reckoned what it did and meant. But trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Thou sublunary lover's love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it does remove those things which alimented it. But we by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is, interassured of the mind, careless eyes, lips, and hands to miss. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion like gold to airy faintest speed. If they be two, they are two souls, deep twined composites are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but does, if the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet the other far does roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I began. This poem shows many features associated with 17th century metaphysical poetry in general, and with Donne's work in particular. According to JohnDonne's biographer, this poem was written in 1611, when Donne, about to travel to France and Germany, wrote for his wife this valediction. Valley means farewell. Diction means, well, speech, so it's a farewell speech. But the poem was first published in 1633, 2 years after Donne's death, in the collection of his poetry called Songs and Sonnets. In this poem, the speaker tenderly comforts his lover at their temporary separation, wishing that, well, they separate calmly, quietly, peacefully, without tears, without signs, without protests. Why? Because their love is a holy one. So the poet argues in this poem that we by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is. Donne's love poems are often referred to as the religion of love, because he takes love between his wife and him as sacred, elevated above ordinary lovers' love. And because of the confidence their love gives them, they are strong enough to endure a temporary separation. Through metaphysical conceits, the poet argues that the two lovers in this poem either possess a single soul and can never be divided, or have twin souls permanently connected to each other. Metaphysical conceit, as Professor Wang Zhuoliang translated it, as 奇思妙喻. It is a far-fetched metaphor or simile in which the poet makes an unusual comparison between two very unlike things. I mean, two things that appear to have nothing in common. Donne, in his poem, argues for the true love of the two lovers by comparing their two souls to the two legs of a drawing compass. Now I would like to have a few words about, the life of Donne. Donne was born in a Roman Catholic family in London. His father, also named JohnDonne, was a well-to-do ironmonger of London, but he died suddenly, leaving 3 children to his wife, Elizabeth, a relative of Catholic martyr Sir Thomas More. Donne grew up experiencing a religious discrimination of the Anglican majority in England against Catholic. After 3 years studying at Oxford University, he spent another 3 years at Cambridge University, but he didn't take any degree at either university because he was a Catholic, and he would not take the oath of supremacy required at graduation. In 1592, when he was 20 years old, he was admitted to study law as a member of Lincoln's Inn. So it seemed natural that Donne should embark upon a career, a legal or diplomatic career. But in 1593, Donne's brother Henry died of a fever in prison after being arrested for giving sanctuary to a banned Catholic priest. And this made Donne begin to question his faith. During this period of residence in London, JohnDonne wrote his first book of poems, Satires, which has been considered one of Donne's most important literary works. JohnDonne was a great love poet, but he rejected Petrarchan conceit, which is a cliched comparison usually relating to a humble worship of a woman's beauty. In JohnDonne's songs and sonnets, he distinguished himself by his highly original attitudes toward sexual love. And these 2 volumes of poetry, 12 satire and songs and sonnets, immediately published, but they had a very wide readership through private circulation of the manuscripts. Having inherited a considerable fortune, young Jack Donne spent his money on books, at the theatre, womanizing, on travels. In 1596, he joined a naval expedition against Spain. And the next year, he joined an expedition to Azores. Upon his return to England in 1598, Donne was appointed private secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. So Donne was beginning a very promising career. He even sat in Queen Elizabeth's last parliament. But in 1601, he secretly married Lady Egerton's 16-year-old niece, Anne More, daughter of Sir George More, Lieutenant of the Tower, and thereby he ruined his own worldly hopes. Sir George More had been thrown into Fleet prison for some weeks, and Egerton dismissed Donne from his post. And for the next dozen years, Donne had to struggle to support his growing family. When his father and uncle learned of the marriage, they were furious and imprisoned Donne while they attempted to dispute the marriage as illegal. But Donne proved the marriage was indeed legal, and he was soon released from prison. But they lived a solitary life in the country. Since Donne had refused to take Anglican orders in 1607, King James persisted and finally announced that Donne would receive no post or promotion from the king unless in the church. Eventually, Donne converted from Roman Catholicism to Anglicanism, and he was enlisted by Sir Thomas Morton to aid him in writing anti-Catholic pamphlets. In 1610, Donne published his anti-Catholic prose work, Pseudo Mater, which held that English Catholics would pledge an oath of allegiance to James I, King of England, without compromising their religious loyalty to the Pope. And this won Donne the favor of the king, who believed that Donne would be a strong addition to his church. So in 1615, Donne reluctantly entered the ministry and was appointed royal chaplain later that year. In 1616, he was appointed reader in the divinity at Lincoln's Inn. Cambridge University had conferred the degree of Doctor of Divinity on Donne 2 years earlier. JohnDonne's style, full of metaphors and religious symbolism, his talent for drama, his wide learning, and his quick wit soon established him as one of the greatest preachers of the era. 160 of his sermons survive. He was a great preacher. Just as Donne's fortunes seemed to be improving, Anne Donne died. His wife died, age 33. So struck by the grief, Donne was thereafter crucified to the world. He continued to write poetry, but the time for love poems was over. In 1618, JohnDonne went as chaplain in his embassy to German princess. When he returned to London in 1620, he was appointed the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in 1621. So this is an eminent position, and he held until his death. So the wide circulation of Donne's early love poems in manuscript, combined with his later fame as one of the most recognized preachers of his era, creates a very particular place for him in English poetry, the sort of poet's corner of his own in St. Paul's Cathedral, where his statue still stands there. On March 27, 1625, King James I died, and Donne preached a sermon before Charles I. But for his ailing health, Donne would have become a bishop in 1630. He died in London in 1631. This is only a very brief sketch about Donne's life. Donne was a metaphysical poet. Metaphysical poetry refers to poetry written by Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, and other 17th century English poets, distinguished by ingenuity, intellectuality, and sometimes obscurity. The label was first used by Samuel Johnson, who identifies these poets as a race of writers who display their learning, use far-fetched comparison, and lack feeling. Critics will, during the heyday of metaphysical poetry, continue to describe poetry in the traditional terms of Renaissance poetics. How they didn't, take metaphysical poetry as a distinct stylistic phenomenon. Dominant in England until Restoration, metaphysical poetry went into eclipse throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, although such poets as Coleridge and Browning still admired JohnDonne very much. But the turn of the 20th century saw the publication of Donne's poetical works in England in 1912. The age of modernism privileged metaphysical poetry with particular intensity. T.S. Eliot, the most influential modernist poet critic, saw in its practitioners, like Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, a sensibility that had not suffered dissociation. That means a capacity for devouring all kinds of experience, which T.S. Eliot contrasted with the singleness of the tone of the Romantics and Victorians. For the first time since 17th century, the metaphysical poets became a vital influence on living poets. Metaphysical poets made use of everyday speech, intellectual analysis, and unique imagery. They aimed to portray ordinary conflicts and contradictions of life. Their poems often took the form of an argument, and many of them emphasized physical and religious love as well as the fleeting nature of life. Strange and ingenious conceits are typical in metaphysical poetry. If we read this poem closely, we'll get a sense of metaphysical poetry, especially the use of conceits in this poem. A valediction for bidding morning. As virtuous men pass mildly away, and whispers to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now. Some say, no. So earth here does not mean while. It means in a way that it introduces an unusual simile, which compares the death of virtuous men to the separation of two lovers. Mildly means peacefully, calmly, quietly. It suggests a peaceful way virtuous men die. Whisper. Why whisper rather than speak? Why do their sad friends disagreed on whether they are still alive and breathing. They whispered. They don't cry. They don't cry over the death of their friends, because they have lived, well, their good, virtuous life. So death does not terrify them. They died in a calm and peaceful way. They whispered to their souls to go, as if they are encouraging their souls to depart from their bodies, because they are going to heaven, a better place. Their death is so mildly that their friends gathered around their deathbeds do not even know whether they are dead or alive. So this is a very dramatic opening of the poem. It sounds, colloquial, conversational. Donne used, everyday speech. Now you can listen to the stanza again. As virtuous men pass mildly away, and whispers to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say no. So let us melt, and make no noise. No tear floods, nor sign tempests move. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. So, notice, the connection between the two stanzas. The first stanza starts with us. So here, us, that means, in a way that. So here, so let us melt. Us refers to the speaker and his lover, his sweetheart. Not until the second stanza do we realize that, the speaker is addressing his lover, from whom he must separate. Now the poem proves itself to be a valediction, a farewell speech. Melt. The image of melting, rather than splitting, implies that even if, they have to separate for a while, for a certain period of time, they might still be connected in a liquefied form, an idea the poem will come back later. They melt into each other. No tear floods, nor sign tempests move. No tear floods, don't cry, don't sign, don't cry over our departure. It's a temporary one. Move means stir up. So don't stir up any tear, any sign. Don't cry over our temporary separation. And this is a typical example of metaphysical conceit, a far-fetched comparison between dying men and separating lovers. But the essence of the comparison, this comparison, lies in the quietness of the two events. The lovers' separation should resemble the quiet way virtuous men pass away. The poet asks his lover not to express her sadness in an over-dramatic and cliched way of conventional separating lovers. Don't cry over our temporary separation. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. And these two lines will answer the question why the speaker wants a quiet separation. Because, the joys the two lovers share in their love, both spiritual and sexual, are holy to the speaker. Their love is holy. So, 'twere means it would be. It would be. And profanation means desecration. Laity refers to common lovers, ordinary lovers, who do not understand the holiness, who do not understand, well, the mystery of the speaker's love. So they will profane love if they know of it. Metaphorically speaking, the speaker here implies that the two lovers are like priests in a religion of love. They wish, well, to be let alone, to be able to love privately. And this is typical in Donne's love poems, such as, well, the canonization, the sun rising. And this celebration of private world of two lovers contrasts strongly with the conventions of Renaissance love poetry, in which the lover almost always wishes to broadcast his love to the world. There is always a humble worship of a woman's beauty. It's what we called Petrarchan-conceit. Okay. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckoned what it did and meant. But tribulation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Moving of the earth refers to an earthquake, which brings harms and fears to human beings. Tribulation of the spheres refers to a trembling or vibration of the whole universe, which is far more significant in its scope, but is innocent because we cannot see or feel this heavenly movement. In ancient and medieval astronomy, tribulation of the spheres referred to the trembling vibration of the outermost sphere of the Ptolemaic universe, causing each sphere within to move accordingly. And this stanza contrasts dramatic upheavals on earth, that is earthquake, with those in heaven, with the tribulations of the spheres in heaven. Earthquakes cause great destruction and create, well, great wonder and confusion among human beings, but tribulation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. We don't see, we don't feel the trembling, the vibrations of the spheres. So the contrast, well, between heavenly and earthly vibrations anticipates a contrast to be developed in the next stanza between ordinary lovers directed by sex and lovers who, like them, depend upon spiritual union. Thou, sublunary, lover's love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence because it does remove those things which alimented it. Now here, sublunary, it means under the moon, refers to earthly lover's love, worldly lover's love, ordinary lover's love, whose soul is sense. Soul, the essence. So the point where we say the essence of ordinary lovers' love is sense. Their love is based on senses. So the speaker moves, well, from his contrast of earthly love with experience he and his lover shared. He explores why earthly lovers cannot endure separation from each other. The soul, or the essence of such ordinary or sublunary lovers' love is sense. So their sense, their love, is based on the senses, and so consists of sexual attraction, so out of sight, out of mind. Therefore, when such lovers separate, they move from each other the very basis of their love, which changes and fades like the moon. But we by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is, interassured of a mind, careless eyes, lips and hands to miss. Refined, it means purified. So our love is so much well purified that ourselves do not know what it is. Donne regularly makes it a condition of a truly mutual love, that the lovers are unable to locate their love in some particular feature or activity. Their love is so refined, so purified, so pure that they themselves do not know what it is. Interassure of the mind. Interassure. Assure means trust. Inter each other. So they trust each other in the mind. It suggests a kind of, mutuality, the closeness of the two souls combined into one. So, careless eyes, lips and hands to miss. Careless, to miss eyes, lips and hands. So they don't care those physical things. They don't care too much to miss such physical things as eyes, lips and hands. So this is the way Donne argues for their truly mutual love. In contrast with ordinary lovers' love, the speaker's love is not based solely on physical things. It is a love so pure that even they themselves do not know how to define it, because they feel confident in each other's feelings, the physical separation, the absence of those physical things, the absence of such physical things as eyes, lips and hands, causes them less anxiety. They don't care too much about that. So our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion like go to everything is beat. Therefore, notice, the word is used very artfully here. Therefore. So it gives us a sense that Donne is drawing a conclusion here. The word indicates a conclusion of a logical argument the poet is making in the poem. The speaker has actually been attempting to persuade his lover, his sweetheart, not to mourn during his temporary departure, which are one, because, they are interassured of the mind. So he suggests that their closeness, by saying that they are two souls which actually combined into one. A breach, though I must go, although I have to go, I have to leave you for a time, for a while. But my departure doesn't mean a break, because our love is so much refined. We trust each other, interassured of the mind. So my departure does not mean a break, but an expansion. Our love expands like gold to everything is beat. So it's an expansion like gold to everything is beat. Now the question here is why gold is valuable, is precious. Donne is saying here that when he leaves on his journey, their one soul will not break, but expand. He uses gold as a simile to clarify, well, this expansion. Make it clear. The preciousness of gold implies the preciousness of their truly mutual love. But I would like to call your attention. The key property of gold here is its malleability. Malleability. Gold is malleable. Gold can be hammered greatly into an extraordinary thin and airy sheet. The simile of gold is used to work emotionally here, since gold is valuable, but also scientifically, since malleability of gold corresponds to the flexibility and expansiveness of their truly pure love. It keeps them bound together during their separation. Okay? More than that. If they be two, they are two souls. Still twine composites are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but does if the other do. Now here we have one of the most famous conceits in poetry. Compass, as I mentioned. It's an instrument to take measurements or to describe circles with two equal legs but joined at the top. Thy soul, the fixed foot. So he compares his wife's, his lover's soul to the fixed foot, and his love and his soul to the other foot. So the speaker first admits that he and his sweetheart may have separate soul, may have two separate souls. But then he illustrates their connectedness in one of Donne's most ingenious metaphysical conceits, in which the speaker compares the lover's two souls to the two legs of a drawing compass. He compares his soul to the fixed foot of the compass and his soul to the other foot. Like the compass, the two souls are joined at the top, and this reminds us that their love is a spiritual union, inter-assured of the mind. Great metaphor, isn't it? And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far does roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. It refers to the fixed foot. He compares his lover's soul to the fixed foot, always sitting in the center. While the other far does roam, here he compares, his soul to the other foot of the compass. It runs when he draws the circle. It leans and hearkens after it and grows erect as that comes home. So the compass conceit is further developed here. The soul of his love is compared to the fixed foot, and his soul, the other foot, will travel far. But her soul always inclines faithfully towards him. Think of, well, the image. The fixed foot leans and hearkens after it. It means, well, her soul always inclines faithfully towards him and will return to its upright position when his foot returns home to her. Donne here engages in a number of puns that suggest the completeness of the love of these two lovers. Or we say the perfection of the love of these two lovers. The perfection of their love is reinforced both by the image of the compass that grows erect. Such wilt thou be to me, who must like the other foot obliquely run. Thy firmness draws my circle just and makes me end where I began. Obliquely, not moving in a straight line. It suggests the indirect route of his journeys. His journeys might be filled with difficulties, frustrations. So he will run obliquely. Thy firmness, of course, refers to the fidelity or faithfulness of his love. So the speaker concludes the conceit, also the poem, by reasserting that his lover's fidelity, spiritual faithfulness, firmness will allow him to carry out his journey and return home happily. So this is the way JohnDonne dramatizes his poetic presentation of love in metaphysical conceits. Now, I would just like to mention, briefly about some themes conveyed in this poem. In the first place, death. JohnDonne often wrote about death, but the way he presents death is very dramatic in this poem by saying that virtuous men pass mildly away, peacefully away. In the beginning of this poem, Donne uses, this notion of quiet and peaceful death as a metaphor for his upcoming departure on a journey that will take him away from his wife for a certain period of time. Second, love. Love is, of course, an integral theme in this poem. The poet first reminds his wife that an outpouring of sadness and emotions over his leaving, his departure, will profane their holy love. Their love is holy. They don't need to cry over the temporary separation. Then the poet celebrates their refined love, the refined, the purified, the pure love between his wife and him, by a contrast with the dull, sublunary lover's love. You see the contrast in this poem between ordinary lover's love and the love, and their love, the love, the spiritual love between, the speaker and his lover. So their love is a spiritual one, which transcends the material world and the limitations of their physical bodies. So they care less eyes, lips, and hands to miss. They don't care too much about physical things. And finally, his love for his wife can never break, but expand over distance, while his wife's love for him will make his circle just. So it's a kind of, a celebration of the pure mutual love. In the third place, faith is also a theme in this poem. Donne is a very religious poet. As we mentioned, he was appointed, he was named the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, a very eminent position. And he was a great preacher, one of the greatest preachers in his era. After comparing the departure to death of virtuous men in this poem, in the opening stanza, the poet goes on to refer to the fact that pious men who are secure in their faith do not fear death. They embrace death because, they know that eternal life awaits them. They will be welcomed by Lord. They're going to heaven, a better place. So, pious men who are secure in their faith do not fear death. And the sad friends that surround these dying men are upset at their loss. They feel sad about the death, the passing away of their friends. But they too are aware that this passing isn't an entirely sad situation, because, the men are going to heaven, a better place. And the men's security in their faith is also used as a metaphor for Donne's security in his relationship with his wife. And finally, science is also an important theme in this poem. Renaissance was also an age of discovery that was marked by an increase in interest, not only in man but also in the world around man. Columbus explored America in an era of colonization. Scientists also made great discoveries in the later part of the Renaissance, including the monumental discoveries made by Copernicus, that the sun, not the earth, was at the center of the universe. Galileo, an Italian physicist and astronomer, invented mathematical compass, which figures centrally in this poem, and built a telescope of 20 times magnification that allowed him to view mountains and craters on the moon. His work marked a turn in scientific method, that is, precise measurement will begin to prevail over popular belief. So science is a prevailing theme in this poem, in Donne's valediction. Whether it refers to the mathematical compass or to the cycle with its infinite and perfect qualities, science is present as Donne refers to the moving of earth, and the fear it strikes into the hearts of men. Science is present when the poet refers to the spheres, the Ptolemaic spheres in which the celestial bodies move. Science is also present as Donne argues that his love is flexible and will expand like gold to everything is beat, referring to both precious metal and its physical properties. In this poem, therefore, Donne dramatizes his presentation of the themes of death, love, religious faith, and science in such an incredible way that Samuel Taylor Coleridge says, "This poem is an admirable poem which none but Donne could have written." Coleridge also says, "Nothing was ever more admirably made than the figure of the compass." Isn't it a great poem? Okay, now let's look at, well, the assignments for next lecture. Learn by heart this poem. 36 lines altogether. And write a journal about the theme of science in Donne's valediction. What is the relationship between literature and science? I think you can get to the web to see the conversation between Mo Yan and Yang Zhenning. A good conversation. And previewed were William Wordsworth's short poem, "I Wander Lonely as a Cloud," and try to think about his definition of poetry in preface to lyrical ballads. What is Wordsworth's definition of poetry? Is William Wordsworth self-contradictory in defining poetry with such expressions as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotion recollected in tranquility? How does this poem illustrate Wordsworth's definition of poetry? Thank you very much.